Welcome to Alien Theorists Theorizing. Theorists in the desert. What is it, 6, 7?
Six.
I'm Braden.
I'm Zell.
I'm Dan.
I'm Andrew.
And tonight we got a very special guest with us, Richard Dolan. Can you see him? There he is. Richard Dolan, welcome to the show.
Hi, Zell. Thanks for having me on with your crew.
Right
Zell
on.
and the boys.
For those of you who do not know who Richard Dolan is, he is among the world's leading UFO researchers, historians, and publishers. He has written a number of classics for the field. UFOs in the National Security State, 2 volumes, AD, After Disclosure, which discusses what would happen if UFO secrecy were to end, and UFOs for the 21st century, a perfect overview for the whole subject. Welcome to the show, Richard Dolan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zell. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on here.
Awesome. Yeah, took this interview last minute. So just let's get started. What got you down this path? What was the catalyst that got you started down the UFO research? If you could, I know that's a hard question, but if you could entertain it.
We're obligated to ask you this through Contact in the Desert.
It's not that complicated. I had the illusion many years ago that I wanted to teach at a university. And so I was working on a PhD in history in Cold War studies. So Harry Truman, the Russians, the birth of the CIA, everything having to do with the world of national security in 1950. Don't ask me why. I don't know why. But I was into it at the time. And we're talking early 1990s. And I stumbled into the UFO subject. It was that simple. One part of it was seeing a UFO conspiracy book on a bookshelf, a great book by Timothy Good called Above Top Secret, The Worldwide UFO Cover-Up. I thought, oh, wow, worldwide UFO cover-up. Even in the 90s, people had heard claims of a UFO cover-up. I mean, we had known that much. So I remembered flipping through the book thinking, like, I'd recognize all of the names that he had in there, but I had not read about them in a UFO context. So that was intriguing to me. I thought, wow, this is like an alternate reality. And then at the same time, I was exploring the early internet, all the news groups. There was no web, but there were a lot of people yelling and screaming at each other. And there were UFO groups out there. And I just became, I don't know, it was this thing. I just became absolutely obsessed. And I didn't like having a big question mark hanging over my head. Like, here I am studying the world of President Harry Truman. And even then, like, I realized in the UFO lore, it was all about the 1940s and Roswell and all of these claims. And I thought, I would like to know. I don't want to have this big question mark. So I thought I would spend a couple of months of my life to resolve the whole thing. And that was 26, 27, whatever years ago. And here I am.
Awesome. Down the path, down the rabbit hole you went.
That's exactly what it was, down the rabbit hole. Yeah. I mean, very quickly I realized, oh, wow, this actually is a serious thing. Oh, there were, military encounters with these objects over sensitive airspace, restricted airspace, things like this. And, oh, wow, they did take it seriously. Oh, while they were telling the public there was nothing to it. So at that moment, I thought there's something here. And the other thing that bugged me about it back then was that the academic community, which I was very involved in at that time, just totally ignored UFOs. And I thought, this actually seems serious. And even, and when you have 3- and 4-star generals and CIA scientific directors and all of these people taking it seriously, I thought, where's the academic work on this? Like, even if these people were mistakenly interested in UFOs, how is that not of historical interest? So that's what started me. And what I quickly realized is that there's no easy solution to UFOs. Like, this is a subject that truly shatters your paradigm of reality. And then it does it again, and then it does it a third time, and a fourth, and a fifth, and it never stops. It just keeps breaking apart what you think reality is.
Well, I know that's happened to lots of us too. It's like, as you dig deeper and deeper and go, you start to make these connections that you didn't see earlier on when you start to get into it. And as you learn new information, you go, well, this little piece fits into this little bit that I learned, years ago. And it just, you kind of get a cascade effect. So yeah, we've kind of experienced the same thing with this show.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well said. Well said. That's what happened to me. I mean, I thought I wanted to answer one little question, which was, did the top levels of the American national security community, did they take this subject seriously or not? At that time, We're talking 1993, 94.
Yeah.
That's all I wanted to know. I didn't want to know, like, is this even real? I wasn't even there yet. I just wanted to know, is this something that was of historical interest? And if so, why had I never read about it in any like serious scholarly work?
Right.
And so I went in very limited way. But what I discovered is like, oh no, this is actually quite serious. And then that opened up all these other questions, like where were the other professors and scholars? Where was the media? Where are the politicians? Like, where is everyone? You got this phenomenon going on here that's clearly getting a lot of people concerned, like phrases like grave concern and perturbed by implications of phenomenon were coming up in these classified memos I'm reading. So I'm thinking, where's the official scholarly intellectual community here? Where the hell are they? So that gets you into studying all other systems of control. And I studied things like Operation Mockingbird, which was the CIA's domination of US mainstream media. And then you just go on and on and on. So like, it's true. That one question led to dozens of other questions and dozens of other rabbit holes.
So yeah, I think like to your point, I think there is no easy question to UFOs because, like you said, and taking from what you've been saying, like the UFO phenomenon encompasses a lot of different areas of study. I could ask you, where would you want to publish a study like this? Which like facet of academia would concentrate on UFOs? Is it aerospace? Is it psychology? Is it sociology? Is it geopolitics? Like, where does it fit in? Or what do you think?
Love that. I mean, I've asked that question many times over the years. Like, seriously, like it's a problem. You know, when I was closer to the academic world, I would ask that a lot. Like, what department would be the best department to take UFOs? Or should it get its own department? Like, my training is in history, so there's definitely a place to study the history of UFO subject, absolutely. But there's countless different sciences. I mean, from photo imaging, right, to biology, if you want to get into genetics, ideas about hybrids and things like that, or physical science, dealing with the study of what these objects, these flying saucers might be made out of, material science or propulsion or energy. And it goes on and on and on. It never stops. It's an all-encompassing subject and here's the other thing about it. Like for years and years, it's different now because the subject's getting a bit more respect, a little more love from the establishment media. But for so many years when I was studying, it was just ridiculed and dismissed. And I kept thinking, any subject that touches upon so many leading edge and fascinating issues of our world in science and in history and in politics, let's not forget that. Like, we're talking about something that's absolutely profound.
No kidding.
And of the highest level of interest. And so that's the great discrepancy that I've always been struck by, which is that how astonishing this subject is and how even now in 2021, how low the level of conversation about it is in most mainstream establishment sources. Like they just don't even begin to get into the deep issues of what's going on with this subject.
And why do you think why do you think initially it was lumped in with, like I'm assuming especially in the 90s when you first started, why do you think it was lumped in with conspiracy theories? Because conspiracy theories, they were created with negative connotations, right? Like they've always been kind of, it's always been this negative, connotation
let's
around
talk about
them.
Conspiracy theory. Absolutely. So the phrase, as far as I've been able to determine, and if listeners can correct me, I would love to be corrected. But I believe that the phrase conspiracy theory actually really got airborne, you could say, in 1967 in a CIA memo. That's for real. So in 1967, the CIA was worried about alternative theories of the JFK assassination. This is all fact.
I wonder why.
And at one point, a memo came out of the CIA that was worried about this. And like, what are we going to do about all these people starting to think different thoughts about JFK? We don't want that. And so, the CIA did what they do best, which is they assumed, let's work with major media and we will smear people who do that with the phrase conspiracy theory and conspiracy theorist. And that's literally what happened. Now, it's possible that phrase existed earlier, but I'm not aware of it. I've looked. What I do know is that the CIA explicitly tried to do this. So what you now see is like when you get these dumb people in mainstream media talking about conspiracy theories dismissively, they are, this is crazy to say, but they are literally doing the CIA's work, which for me to say that makes me a conspiracy theorist. Weirdest sort of irony. But to answer your question, you know, back in the 1940s and 50s, it was very obvious that this phenomenon was of tremendous significance and seriousness to the United States military and the intelligence community. And that's not a matter of speculation. That's a matter of proof. The documents prove it. We've got enough declassified statements that make this very clear. And so what obviously had to be done was, if they didn't want this to be discussed in the mainstream, and they did not, because this is a difficult problem, the best thing that they could do is to encourage major media of that time to invest the subject with ridicule. And that's precisely what happened. And we know this happened, for example, in the 1953 infamous Robertson Panel Report, which was a CIA-sponsored study of this. And their conclusion was, yeah, we have to debunk this in the public. And they've done that ever since. And so what you have are, you know, I mean, Americans particularly don't like to, certainly didn't like to think that their media was controlled by the CIA or the government. But the fact is, there's been a tremendous amount of influence over mainstream media for years and generations and lifetimes. And that's just the reality. So I think that's the answer, is that there's been, you know, we don't have a generic ground up culture. A lot of our culture is actually imposed top down. I'm totally convinced. You've got major corporations that have tremendous power, that are in bed with the national security community, and they set a lot of the agenda. And that's been the case in the 1940s and 50s as well. And I think that's what we're dealing with.
Right. Now, I want to ask you while we have you on here, because for the first time in my life, UFOs, like these phenomenon, are in the mainstream the most they've ever been. And it started back in 2017 with the New York Times, the first mainstream people to put out the black budget, the ATIP program with Luis Elizondo and all the other names to go along with it. And then it took a couple years for the military to finally say that these videos were indeed real after ridicule and, you know, smearing Elizondo and such. And then we just get, you know, we get last summer, they start talking about it more, and we just get now, I mean, it hasn't fully been released, but like the Pentagon briefing on like what on that in the back end of the COVID stuff.
Yeah, so, that's right. Got snuck in there by President Trump.
So what's going on with that? Well,
it's a fascinating thing. Like, we're in a completely new era now. Since 2017, it's totally true. And you mentioned the New York Times. It had 2 articles in December of 2017. And really that, I believe, comes down to a very small group of people. I would say the folks over at To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences, TDSA, that's Tom DeLonge, Elizondo, Chris Mellon, Hal Puthoff, Steve Justice, and a few others. And then journalists working with the New York Times, Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal particularly, I think really fought to get those articles in there. This is my understanding of it. So you had a small group of people coordinating to break this story. And then the New York Times, being what the New York Times is, made sure that there were skeptical, nonsensical statements put into those 2 articles. But it's true, like what that did was it allowed the rest of our establishment to speak about UFOs. And that is because the New York Times is the Pravda of the American system. You know how Pravda was with the old Soviet Union, the voice of the established opinion. That's what the New York Times did. So they made it permissible for people to talk about it. And actually what's happened is that we've seen, I don't know if we want to call it an explosion, but definitely a real opening of conversations about this from the upper level mainstream media. You've got Tucker Carlson at Fox talking to Luis Elizondo about UFO crash retrievals, for God's sake. Like, right. Who would have thought that? There still hasn't been enough of this, but it's certainly more than I would have predicted 5 years ago. And where that's going to go is a really good question. Now, the next step is this new UAP task force report that you were just mentioning, Zell. And I do have a little bit of word. I mean, we're hearing more and more like what's going to be in this report. So the word is that it'll be 78 pages. I assume a certain percentage of that will be padding. So maybe let's say 50 pages of actual content, which is not a lot. Right. Not a lot. And we're told that at least one conclusion is that there's not any evidence to show that this is U.S. secret text. So the number of reports Originally, the New York Times a couple of weeks ago said that there were going to be 120 cases. I'm now told that it'll be fewer than that. I don't know how much fewer.
Right.
So
Sure,
it
that
could
was
be
the
kind of
original
skimpy.
answer. It was 120, and then I think that's the main impression that we've been getting is that it's going to be some type of it basically says they're not ours, or is what the impression is. They're definitely not, or at least not the U.S. militaries. Like that's kind of
But keep in
what I've
mind,
seen.
like Elizondo pointed this out. He said this to me personally, and I think he said this publicly. It often can take 6 months for people to get the clearances to actually do a proper investigation. And they're given 6 months. You're probably talking about a couple of guys, a couple of people with, you're going through this labyrinth, this maze of the Pentagon. And a lot of these places to get information out are probably not going to be easy. So it's really questionable to ask, like, how much information genuinely can they get access to? So the real question is this task force, as it is called, truly able to get a sufficient amount of information to make an accurate determination? Is this ours? Is this Russian, Chinese, or extraterrestrial, or something else? I think the answer is probably not. Although, realistically, you look at the Tic Tac UFO case of 2004. All right. If you want to just take it at face value, you got David Fravor and the other witnesses' testimony. You've got testimony of people like Kevin Day, who was running all the radar out of the USS Princeton.
Yep.
A lot of detail. There's no one in hell who's going to say that was Russian or Chinese. There's not a chance. And everyone knows it. Everyone knows it. When you get Fravor's testimony that this thing took off and was out of his line of vision within 2 seconds, I mean, I'm estimating we're talking 10,000 miles per hour departure speed. That's outrageous.
It's insane.
But yet, these speeds have been tracked for decades and decades. I have reports from the 1940s that talk about speeds of 18,000 miles per hour, tracked with high quality instrumentation. This is not new. So when you look at the Tic Tac report, which is supposedly being covered in this task force report, how in God's name are they going to say that this is anything other than extraterrestrial? The Chinese didn't have any capability like this in 2004. And the Russians, I can tell you geopolitically, not a snowball's chance in hell would the Russians have been responsible for something like that in 2004.
There was, some people theorize that during we took in Operation High Jump, we grabbed all the scientists to do the V2 rockets, but the Russians may have grabbed scientists in Osavayakim.
You're talking about paperclip?
Paperclip, yes. Yeah. And they grabbed scientists that were, into propulsion and aerospace engineers. And so there was, I've read Annie Jacobson's book where she kind of touches on that, where, perhaps Russians did have these capabilities. But I think at this point in time, that would have become known.
Yeah.
That they were at this level of way beyond the rest of the world. And I just don't see that. It doesn't.
I totally agree. This is the problem. When you look at the Germans were really great at documenting pretty much everything they did. Like, they documented the Holocaust, for God's sake. They documented all of their secret tech, like the V1 and V2 rockets. We've got total documentation on that. The Horton HO-229, which was like the flying wing design, which was an amazing futuristic aircraft. Like, we've got all the data on that. And, all of the advanced Messerschmitt crafts, all of that. But we don't really have, there's no data on the Glock, the Bell, and there's nothing on a lot of the German flying saucer stuff. Yeah, we know about Victor Schauberger, and he did build, I think, 2 prototype disc-shaped airframes. So the Germans were doing some very unusual physics, or they were looking into unusual physics. They had a thing against so-called Jewish physics. This is true. So that left Einstein out of the loop, and that was not good for the German scientific community. But it did mean that they were looking at unusual things. But the fact is that there's really not a whole lot to hang your hat on in terms of German flying saucers. And so people like to talk about this a lot. And I've looked into it. My colleague and friend Joseph Farrell, of course, looked into it a lot. But I'll just say for myself, I see no infrastructure after the war that's going to be building these flying saucers. From where? From Argentina, from Antarctica. I hear people talk about this.
Right.
And there's just nothing there.
So
And
what
on
are the
top of that-
chances that,
Go on,
this
yeah,
is
sorry.
perhaps like, so, I mean, of course the report could go out, and like you said, there's going to be a bunch of padding, but also within there, I'm sure there's going to be room for, them to use their, the governmentese, the hedging your bet language, it being a little bit more ambiguous and stuff, where they could perhaps say this is not U.S. military tech, but that still doesn't discount, that doesn't automatically disqualify, secret DARPA projects or, Lockheed Martin or, a private company of some type, that this is a proof of concept or something like that. Like, what are your views on that?
Yeah,
like, what do you think of the possibilities or, probability that could happen?
That's an excellent point you're making. Like, they're going to be very lawyerly in their wording of
Legalese,
this.
that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Everyone's got
I
to
was looking for.
CYA, gotta cover your ass, and they will certainly seek to do that. So yeah, it'll be interesting to read that carefully. But right now, all we know is that the word is that they're going to be denying that it's U.S. secret black budget tech. But your point about Lockheed, or your point about private contractors, that's a very good point, because you could see them leaving that as a loophole, right? And I mean, everyone at this point probably knows that Lockheed does have access to alien disks and has been attempting to reverse engineer this for a long time. In my opinion, that's absolutely the case. And I think many people understand that to be true. And so there's always that as a possibility, sure. I would be very surprised if this report tries to implicate the Chinese or the Russians, because that would be very geopolitically incendiary. I mean, there's enough going on right now with China in the South China Sea and with Russia over in, eastern Ukraine. I cannot think that this report would want to inflame any of those tensions, particularly on, what I think is limited evidence anyway.
Right.
So I don't know what they're going to go. I mean, I think they're going to be very careful. The fact is, when you scratch the surface of the intelligence community and you talk to people who actually have familiarity with the UFO phenomenon, they all know that this is not from here. They all know we're being visited or monitored or infiltrated or whatever. This is it's not controversial. So the problem is, how do they continue to deny that? They will continue to deny that as long as they can, for years and years if they can.
Wouldn't it be extremely apparent, though, if it was made from terrestrial material or not? Wouldn't that be, even if it was Russian or Chinese, you'd be able to tell if this is material that is found on this planet?
Well, and we have an understanding of physics.
In one of the videos that Jerry McCorbell released, I mean, there were many claims that, the flashing lights of one of the triangles was clearly something that we met, like a navigation light.
Right.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't know. Maybe if you're an alien and you're just trying to screw around in U.S. airspace, maybe you'll put navigation lights on. Who knows, frankly. But the fact is, what we've learned about some of the reports from 2019 and 2020, which have recently come out, and I hope that they will be in this report, is that we're talking swarms. You got U.S. battleship maneuvers. All right. This is serious stuff, like off the coast of Southern California, off the coast of Norfolk, Virginia. Like, you're not going to just send in swarms of drones day after day, which is what we are now being told, and screwing with battleships that have Aegis-class electronic intercept systems that are going to screw you up. Those things are very substantial. So if you're going to do this day after day, I mean, there's just no geopolitical answer for that as to who's going to be responsible, whether it's our own black budget tech or China or Russia. There's not a good answer.
Well, and there's the thing of if they're manned craft, these things are operating like they would have to solve a problem of not turning the pilots into mashed potatoes.
Yeah.
On these accelerations and maneuvers, and how they can, become these trans-medium crafts where they're entering water and air effortlessly. Not to mention that, to your point of why wouldn't they come down and screw with us and put these navigational lights on? Like, we do that to monkeys. Like, we put robotic monkeys into video camera their society, right? And they all know something's up with this weird monkey that we send in.
Yeah.
So why something else of a higher intelligence and a higher capability of us wouldn't do the same to us? Be like, hey, look, they fly around the skies. They have these lights. Let's do the same thing, right? We'll blend in. They won't know. They're dumb.
That's actually a really good point. with the monkeys. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, it makes sense. It's frustrating because everyone loves to assume that they can think for the aliens or they can think for, whoever's behind this. So they assume, navigation's like, well, it has to be ours. But when you're swarming a U.S. battle group, like, we got to come up with something better than that, because that's not an easy thing to explain.
Yeah, no kidding.
Not an easy thing to explain. So I don't know. I think my take on this task force is that they're going to do the typical bureaucratic, legalistic language. They'll probably leave the door open for this as a mysterious phenomenon, which is much farther along than we've been, even 5 years ago. So that's a good thing. Yeah. But there are many, many, like if you were in charge of managing this secret, right? So let's say because the Pentagon and the intelligence community is not monolithic. So there's obviously factions. There has always been a intense secrecy faction. You read the old books of Donald Kehoe in the 1950s, and he talked about this, the secrecy group. But there were also individuals within the military who did not support the secrecy, and they believed in getting the information out. That's always been the case. What I personally think has happened is that the information that we've seen come out in the last few years has been the result of such a faction. This is my opinion. So I don't see this as an op. Some people are talking about disinformation, psyop. I don't believe that. It doesn't mean that there's total truthfulness about this. There's clearly not. I mean, I think folks like Elizondo he obviously knows much, much more than what he's saying officially. Chris Mellon, same thing. But I think this is the result of a faction, and I think that there are enemies to this faction, and they will hold the Alamo as long as they can. And there are many layers and places to defend. Like right now, we're at the place of, well, there's something out there, we don't know what it is. That's obviously fiction, but they're maintaining it. But there are many other lines of defense, so to speak, that can be held for a long time before we get into things like crash retrievals and like obvious cover-up and alien bodies and all that kind of thing. So I think this defense will go on for quite a while. If they're able to defend this for 5 years, they'll do it. If they can do it for 50 years, they'll do that as well. They'll do it as long as they can. Right.
Now, so speculation aside now, after all your years and all the books you've written, what's your ET hypothesis? If these are not, these are not a black budget, the new age SR-71 Blackbird that we had no idea about for a while. Like it's not a new tech that it doesn't seem to be.
It's not.
We've
been dealing with this. Yeah, we've had very well measured, instrument recorded reports of objects doing the exact same maneuvers back in the 1940s. I read a very credible report in the Canadian National Archives from 1936, Northwest Territory, middle of nowhere, perfect tic-tac UFO. Like, guy was doing aerial reconnaissance of the Northwest Territories for the Canadian government. He looked up and saw this object directly above him, instant acceleration, gone, 1936. This has been around for a long time. What I believe is that the monitoring of the human species has gone in two phases. So phase one is the one that lasted for thousands of years. And I think there was a group that very quietly in the background just kept an eye on us. And I think that there have every now and then have been sightings and maybe even encounters with other beings that look kind of human, but they're not human. And I think that there's been a group that's watched us and perhaps monitored us for many, many, many years. But what I think happened is that the human race, our civilization, has gone through a transition. And, you could say it started when we discovered science a couple of centuries ago, but it really took off, let's say 150 years ago, 19th century, with all of our industrialization, where you get, trains, planes, automobiles, radio, television, computers, nuclear weapons, missiles, iPhones, internet, the whole thing.
Right.
Like, you think about how quickly, we existed for thousands of years with a society of horses pulling wooden carts, and suddenly, boom, snap of a finger, we're now doing all of this. Our capabilities as a species has gone exponential. It's not incremental. So anyone who's been able to observe us can obviously see that we're about to leap right into their world. So I think we're bringing the whole neighborhood in. And that includes gray aliens, probably reptilians, probably who the hell knows what else. So some of these groups might be predisposed to be friendly toward us, and others, I think at least one group is not. That's my opinion, just from looking at the information that's there. So we're one generation away from having like strong universal generative artificial intelligence that's basically going to run our whole planet. 24/7, 5G, 6G, 7G surveillance, no privacy. You can say goodbye to that for the rest of all time. And we're going to turn ourselves into one big giant anthill. That's the future of humanity. We're like one big ant farm. So we're going to become like the aliens that we've been observing all this time. That's what I believe. I wrote a book. In fact, I wrote a book called The Alien Agendas just last fall, in which I kind of laid this out. So I argued we're about to enter what I believe is the fourth stage of humanity. Let's call it the transhumanist stage. Go from hunting and gathering to agriculture to science to transhumanism. That's fourth stage, and we're entering it now. And it's digital control, data crunching. It's all the stuff that we're seeing now. And I think that that's what's got their interest. And what that means in terms of their policy is a really interesting thing, and we can speculate about it. But I think that is why we're seeing tremendous amounts of UFO activity, alien encounters, and the like.
So we're not dealing, in your opinion, with one, scientific species who has traversed time or space to come here and where their science project. The whole galactic neighborhood seems to be aware of like humanity's evolution.
It's my opinion. I mean, I can't know, but it makes sense to me that, when you look at the evidentiary data, so you have all of these different, there's a very wide variety of types of beings that people have described, but within, it's not an infinite variety. Within reason. So you've got a lot of these beings are human or human looking. A lot of them look like gray aliens, tall and short. That takes up the majority of them right there. And then you've got a certain number that look more insect-like. You've got a certain number that are described as reptilian in one way or another. And then you got what I call the kitchen sink. You got like a wide variety of like all these other that are reported much less frequently. I don't know what to think about them. I don't know, to what extent can they screw with your perception and make you think you've seen something that you didn't see? I don't know.
Right.
But I think that there's a few basic types, and I think the grays and the insectilins, I think they may be related, as David Jacobs hypothesized. He might be right. But I think they're latecomers. I think we've seen them for maybe the last 100 years, and that's about it. And I think there have been human-like beings that have monitored us for many, many years. That's what I think. Look, we're all doing counterintelligence here, trying to figure this out the best we can, and I'm just giving my best theory. But I would confidently say that there's at least a couple of different groups that are here, and that they are, like, I could speculate what they're like, and I might be right and I might be wrong, but I suspect that they are at the very least, concerned about what we might do, because we're actually going to get close to their level really soon. Like, I think we have this mistaken idea that, we're so far behind them, we must seem like insects. And I think that's total BS. I think that we've gone exponential. We're about to produce very, very strong post-singularity AI, very, very strong nanotech, very strong bioengineering, and a lot of other things in terms of communication and data analysis, that this is not a linear progression. We're doing a leap. And I think we're going to be almost at a level of parity to some of these other groups. And I think that might, if I were them, I would be concerned. You look at these humans. We're creative. We're kind of aggressive. We have a lot of initiative. We like to throw our weight around. We might be an annoyance.
We're violent. We can reverse engineer just about anything we find.
Yeah.
For dangerous.
I don't think we're the only violent species, by the way. Like, we like to diss ourselves all the time. Like, oh, we can't get our shit together. We can't get it. We're so violent. And I think there are probably other species out there that are similar.
Well,
without a doubt.
A lot of people theorize that, like, the very reason humanity has evolved to our point is through our conflict, because through conflict comes innovation. So, like, just the very conflict between humanity seems to have progressed us forward, not only in, like, arms race or anything, but through, like, medicine and, like, anatomy. Like, a lot, surgeons.
What you say is absolutely true.
Surgeon generals in the army, like those, like, from the world wars, like, that's most of our surgeries, because people just doing it on the battlefield, just in huge leaps and bounds, and
Absolutely. So yeah, conflict. This is a really weird thing. Like, you get a lot of contactees will say things like, well, the aliens want us to be less aggressive. They want us to be nice and loving and, upgrade our frequency and ascend to a higher level and so forth. But in fact, you really have to, I wonder sometimes, like, are those beings just trying to demoralize the local population and tell them, you suck, you're terrible, you're violent, you've got to change your ways? Seriously, disarm. And I don't know what I think about that, but it's actually something to consider because, as you were just saying, like, our native aggression, like, we're biological creatures. We're not robots. We're not artificially intelligent algorithms. We're actually like flesh and blood. We're born, we grow, we have emotions, we die. And we struggle for survival. Like, we forget that because we have a nice society now that like provides things for us. But the way that we have always been, we're hardwired to struggle to survive. And that's actually our secret power. That's like our secret weapon, is like our ability to are you there? I'm seeing someone. Oh, looked like you cut out for a second there.
I might have, but we're back.
I just think that that's actually an amazing thing about us. And the fact that we do struggle and that we fail and that we fall flat on our face and we get back up, like, that's an amazing thing about us. And if I were a super intelligent telepathic alien, I might be a little concerned about this upstart human species that's just now discovering like all the secrets of the kingdom through science.
Yeah.
And it's I could agree with you on some of those points. But some of me parts would wonder that a super intelligent, non-human intelligence that has, crossed the vast distances between stars, or an interstellar race, if they're at least coming here and they're able to communicate, at least, if they're not residents of our immediate solar system, like if they don't live on Neptune or on the moons of Jupiter or something like that, like they would have to be able to communicate with their central hub or whatever like that. So I would assume they have some kind of technology that is, fathoms, huge leaps beyond what we could possibly
Science fiction.
At the
science
moment.
fiction stuff,
Yeah.
It's something on par with like godlike abilities, masteries of, physics that we haven't even started, or maybe we've just started to understand. And I agree with you that we are, we're making huge leaps and bounds in our comprehension of the physical sciences, of our minds that we barely comprehended in the first place. Like, we're just mapping out the parts of the brain and how they interact with each other. Like, if you have a race that's out there traveling between star systems or even galaxies, like, I would see if they saw us, like, wiping us out would not be that hard a challenge for them. Like,
maybe at the moment
we can.
But think about this.
Feel like we could put these things out there. Like, we could come with these innovations. We could make a scientific breakthrough, but then applying that would take us years. And in that time, they would have I would think they would have the time to be like, okay, how are we going to deal with them?
Yeah, maybe.
Right.
But think about where we were. Compare the world to 100 years ago. So like the 1920s.
Yeah.
So like the 1920s was a pretty advanced period. I mean, they had cars, we had motion pictures, great
They were all
silent
in
comedy,
lockdown from a
highly
pandemic.
But yeah, they handled their pandemic better than we did. That's for sure. So like they actually had a lot going on. But you compare scientifically and in terms of our technology and what we know, I mean, it's no comparison. Like they would be astonished at where, like, some of the things that we know. They would probably be horrified by a lot of the things about us as well. But so think where we could be in 100 years in terms of what we know about superluminal communications, or, quantum communications, or non-locality, what Einstein called spooky action at a distance, and all of these concepts that we're just grasping now. Or things like space-time metric engineering. That's one of the papers. Hal Puthoff wrote that paper for the ATIP program about a decade ago. Like, we're just starting this, but in a mere century from now, with very strong AI programs and who knows what other tools we'll have, I don't know, like, we really might be more orders of magnitude even beyond where we are now, and potentially much closer to these other highly advanced beings. Is this just consider it's possible What if the knowledge you achieve gets to a certain plateau and then you're done? Like, what if that's actually true? Like, what if knowledge doesn't go on for an infinite period of time? What if there's a limit to like the laws of nature, the laws of physics? Like, if that's true, maybe they've already gotten it and they've mastered it. And what if we're about to master it? So there might be gradations within that, but we might be on roughly a level playing field. And as time goes by, we may get closer and closer. I'm just putting that out there as a possibility.
No, I like that.
That's cool.
I think I'm waiting for the next, I'm really working for the next like material breakthrough, you know, because it seems like we're still limited by, what is it, Moore's Law? Like we're still limited by the physical composition of our circuits, of our, like the construction of our technology, like the materials that we use and the way that we use them, that's still limiting us. Like once we get past that, and then combined perhaps with a super intelligent and hopefully benevolent AI that could put those things into practice or develop some type of construction, of construction program. We could make that leap. I think that's what I'm always waiting for, is that giant, that big thing is like, we've done it. We have broken the limits on the circuits. We can put, everything's a superconductor now. Like,
well, on a personal level,
not a problem. Yeah.
You guys might live to see that. I hope that I'm checking out of this mortal coil at that time, because I actually don't think I want to be part of that. I actually like being a human being. And what I see in the future is essentially a total transhuman future for our species in which we actually live that reality. Because I just see that, like, I think that's where we're going, and I don't want to live forever. I don't want to live for 200 or 300 or 500 years. I think I would probably lose my mind. I think we'd probably go insane, and I just don't. I don't have that desire. So I'm happy to be born, live, grow old, and die, and have mysteries in my life and mind. But it is quite possible that future generations are going to be in a very different situation. And there may be, like, I'm sure there'll be great rewards that they will be glad that they have. And I wish them luck. I'm like, good luck with that. I'll be very happy to live out my life in a very humble, fully biological manner, unenhanced.
Yeah, that's until we summon you back up with our 7G Ouija board to have another interview. But
bring my head back like on Futurama.
I'll put you in a glass jar.
Now, Richard, I want to ask you, what do you think about, do you believe that, some government agencies have been working with some of these alien species? I mean, you hear about it all the time of, Dulce Base and these groups or organizations, working with them. Do you believe that we are currently in some aspects working with maybe some or all of these species, and that's why they're trying to keep it quiet, is because it's not so much let the public know, but they don't want enemies to know that they have these other species helping them?
Definitely the latter. Like, whether it's species or technology, like I absolutely do believe that the United States at various moments recovered alien tech. And I think it could go back at least as far as 1941. Possibly there was an Italian crash in 1933. I've started to look into that in the last few years, and I think that might be legit. U.S. 1941, 1947, 1948, 1953, all of those I think happened. And so we got tech. And I think, yes, bodies, and I'm inclined to believe that at least there was at least one live being that lived probably until 1952. I think I tend to believe that. I can't say I know for sure. Look, I'm just guessing. In terms of collaboration, that's a harder question to answer. I've read some accounts that strike me as kind of credible. I read Dan Sherman's Above Black, which I thought, that's actually quite interesting to me. Even the late Charles Hall, with his story about, being out in Nevada in the middle of Indian Springs, dealing with these tall whites, as he called them. I think it's actually true. So I don't dismiss it. I think it's a definite possibility. How deep the communication goes, that I don't know. I mean, I just don't know. I think that it is possible, yes. And
then
In fact, I
my
would be
follow-
surprised if it was a flat no. I would be surprised if it was a hard no.
And then just a follow up. Say this UFO report blows all our expectations way to the water, and they just say, yeah, they're real, they're out there.
That won't happen. But go on.
Right? Let's theorize on that for a second. Does it change?
Sure.
Does it change our way of life instantly? Like, what do you think happens if they were to do that? Just full disclosure, drop a surprise.
I tried to write a book about this a decade ago, and my co-author and I, we had this idea of the avalanche effect. This is absolutely what I believed, which was, let's say the president of the United States comes out and goes to the podium and says, yep, it's actually real. They're here. And so that would start what I thought would be an avalanche effect, which would be, on the assumption that there would be enough media out there with intelligence and curiosity to ask follow-up questions like, how have you kept this secret for so long? And what does that say about the structure of secrecy and who are these other beings? And so I always had hypothesized that there would be this kind of crazy, almost revolutionary aftermath of disclosure. And what I'm seeing is something different from what I predicted. So what I'm seeing is a kind of drip effect. But actually what I think we're seeing is a faction that's pushing it and another faction that's resisting. So it's like a football game and they're at the 50-yard line. Maybe that's it. So in terms of where, I'm trying to remember what your original question was. I'm sorry. But I think
what would it change? Would life on Earth change with this information?
Well, eventually, yes, absolutely. If it depends on how much truth can come out. So if we get enough truth that says it's real, they're here, we've got some of their flying saucers, we've been studying it for many years, we've got some of their tech, and we've actually made some breakthroughs. If it goes that far, then yes, you're talking about a lot of implications, like energy for starters. As I've been saying for years, a 10-year-old kid looking at a zigzagging flying saucer that can instantly accelerate is going to intuit that they're not using gasoline or petroleum to go from one point to another. So implicit in an understanding of UFOs is a post-petroleum infrastructure in terms of energy, it seems to me, because there's got to be an answer there, whether it's nuclear fusion, hot or cold, or whether it's zero-point energy or something different. I don't know what the answer truly is, but it's not going to take us long to figure it out once we acknowledge that this is real. And that will change our world in a significant way right there alone. And then there's going to be countless other ways in which we will be deeply affected by this new information, and it will change our culture and it will change our understanding of even who we are as a species, I think.
Yeah. The five of us we're not going to change. We're just going to say, told you so.
I'll have a few of those days as well. Believe me, I'll enjoy that. Wag my finger a little bit, act all superior. But then, comes the hard work of figuring out what kind of world are we going to live in? My biggest fear is that we're going to achieve some kind of disclosure while living in a kind of new version of totalitarian society. I would like to see disclosure happen within a world of freedom where we actually can have some transparency from our governments, in which we actually can get answers that are meaningful and in which our governments are responsive to the will of the people. And my greatest fear is that we're very rapidly moving into a world in which that's not going to happen, and in which we will have total control over, most digital media, avenues of information, communication, and so forth. So when a narrative is rolled out and people like us will not have a reasonable chance to argue with that narrative or get anyone to hear us. And I think that's unfortunately the world we're moving into.
Well, we hope for the opposite. Hopefully.
Yeah, I've been a little bit of a downer lately, so I hope for the opposite as well.
Now, hopefully podcasting stays free and open, and at least we have one avenue to bypass the mainstream.
Someone actually said Dolan's the new Dr. Doom. That was the old nickname for Ed Dames on Coast. And I read it, I think it was in a YouTube comment, and I was like, oh, damn, am I that much of a downer? But yeah, maybe. I just, I try to be a realist.
If that makes us the Fantastic Four, I'm okay for it.
Yeah.
I'm all for it.
What was, I didn't hear that. Say that again.
If that makes us the Fantastic Four, I'm all for it. I like it.
Yeah, you guys are pretty good. You are actually all really interesting, and you ask great questions as well. I think sounds like you have a good time too.
Oh, it's we love the topic. We love all the cases, and it's been a fun ride. We're kind of in the middle of a modern day UFO wave here, and it seems to be the best version of it so far. So
I've never connected with you guys before, but I have to say, like, I'm really enjoying this, and you all seem like really like into it and knowledgeable, and it's fun for me to talk about this with you.
Richard, it's for us. We don't usually do interviews, so we've only reached out to very few number of speakers and people who are knowledgeable on the topic. Because sometimes we find that the interview, when you have someone on, it's not as entertaining as this interview has been for us. So it's always nice to, when we have, speakers on the subject like yourself on, where we can just have a good time and a little more free flow of information and free flow discussion rather than, just a very hard, this is what I know and this is what I'm saying. Yeah. And that's that.
We like
very cool.
We enjoy it when the interview starts with, let me fill up my glass of wine.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we could tell the listeners, I had forgotten we were doing this interview, and I had a full, very tall glass of wine before we started.
Amazing.
And I'm still working on.
We fully knew we were doing this interview, and most of us have been drinking.
Yeah.
That's a recipe for success, man. That's how you podcast.
I mean, I agreed to do the interview, and then I just totally forgot.
It was last minute.
You messaged me.
I do the show and I forgot.
We text them all the time.
So I was a little embarrassed about that.
No.
But the thing is, I actually love this subject. I love the subject of UFOs. Like, it makes me crazy at times. The community can make you crazy. We've all seen it. And like, there's a lot of personalities and egos and all of that. But it's the thing that keeps me coming back is the subject itself. It's like, this is a phenomenon that is absolutely fascinating, and it's profound. It's totally of the highest level of significance, and I just can't leave it alone.
No. On that note, we appreciate you doing the work. I mean, you're one. Yeah, as Braden said, you're one of the few guests we've had on, and it's been a blast. And we've definitely followed you. And as you said, there is some personalities who can make for a tough interview, or the ego gets in the way. But this one's been a blast, and we can't thank you enough for taking it on short notice.
What a pleasure. Thank you, all of you guys, for having me on. It's been a lot of fun.
Now, if people aren't familiar with your work, where can people support you the best? Do you have a website?
Yeah, I've got two websites. I have Richard Dolan Press with all my books, and I've got Richard Dolan Members, which is really where I do all of my work. So Richard Dolan Members. I put content up there every week, multiple times a week. I've got a YouTube channel. Just type my name in. And I have social media as well. But basically, Richard Dolan Members is really where everything is happening.
Right on. We'll make sure.
I've got, it's a paywall, but there's a lot of free stuff there as well. It's like, you can just go there. It's got lots of articles, audio, video, and all of that stuff. No,
you're entitled to this financial support for all your hard work. So
it's the only way to survive. Like, I have to, if I want to do this on a full-time basis, I've had to find a way to support myself. And awesome. So this is my best solution at the time.
Now, just before we let you go, if you wouldn't mind, just say, I'm Richard Dolan, and you're listening to Alien Theorist Theorizing.
Alien Theorist?
Theorizing.
Theorizing. That's so crazy. Yes, I will do it.
Yeah.
Here we go. I'm Richard Dolan, and you're listening to Alien Theorists Theorizing.
Right on.
Perfect. Yeah.
Nailed it.
Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Richard. That was amazing.
It was
lots of fun.
Hopefully we can meet up at one of these conventions here when things open up, and we can have a glass of wine in person and shoot the shit. We'd love to have you on again when you've got something going on. Just shoot us a message.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Are you all out in British Columbia?
3 of us, and Dan's in Virginia.
Yeah, I'm in Virginia. I'm in the U.S.
So 1 Yank, 3 Canucks.
3 Canucks, exactly. And I made a note here while you were talking about something. What was that? What was the case you mentioned about the Tic Tac UFO in the Canadian Arctic?
Yeah.
Northwest Territories.
It's actually in my book, UFOs for the 21st Century Mind. So someone can check it out there.
Yep.
But it's, I was in Ottawa doing research back in 2005, long time ago, and going through, in there you've got the UFO reports from the old Canadian National Research Council, the NRC, which used to accept UFO reports from the public. So if you saw a UFO back in the 70s or 80s, you'd report it to the RCMP, and they would forward it to the National Research Council. And then the scientists in the white coats would just put the reports in a file and run away from them forever because they were terrified of looking at UFO reports. But now the good thing is that all of those reports are available to the public. You can go into the archives. And I went in there for about a week 15 years ago and just plowed through. And I found many interesting reports. One was from an elderly man writing in the early 1980s. And he said, look, this is long after the fact, nothing you can do about it, but I just want to put this in for posterity. And he submitted his military records. Like, he was a genuine, legit guy. His handwriting was impeccable. And he said, back in 1936, when I was 25 years old, he described his job, which to me was one of the coolest jobs in the world. Like, he was flying in one of those pontoon planes in the remote Northwest territories where, like, there's infinite little lakes everywhere and no one can live because you can't live up there. And his job was to do aerial mapping and photography for the Canadian government in 1936. Probably for the first time because they couldn't get aircraft up there before then.
No, yeah.
So that was his job, right? He's 25 years old. So he said, I was doing a pre-flight check at what was it called? Aylmer Lake, Aylmer. Look it up.
Aylmer, Aylmer.
You will gasp at how remote this place is. You can't get to it to this day. It's impossible. Like, if you were ultra hardy, there's some people who go up there for incredible fishing. I don't know how they could get there. There's no roads. So he's up there in perfect blue sky, 1936. Do you see it yet?
Yeah. I see the lake. Yeah.
I see it. It's
big fish.
It's remote.
Aylmer Lake. I spelled it wrong.
It is
Aylmer.
Oh, because
it's way up. There's like 100 million lakes around it, but yeah, it's like it looks like a big upside down T kind of.
That's
Look at the size of the fish.
He's up there. Yeah, it's like legendary fishing from what it appears. But like, try getting there. So he's there in 1936. There's no one there, probably for hundreds of miles. There's probably no one around this guy. He says, I happened to look up. And there above me, he said, was the most perfect configuration of an airship one could imagine. It was a direct quote.
Oh, cool.
And he said this thing was shaped, it was slightly elongated. And by the way, in my book, UFOs of the 21st Century Mind, I've got the exact citation, record group, file. Like, you could read that and you could go to Ottawa, you could find this record.
Right.
And anyway, he says, I looked straight up. It was a slightly elongated craft. It was gunmetal gray. It wasn't white. That was the only difference with a Tic Tac. But he said, I couldn't see how large it was because there was no reference point. There were no clouds. I couldn't tell how high up it was and so forth. But he said, I thought it was pretty large. And he said it was in a north-south configuration, and he watched it rotate silently to an east-west configuration and then instantly accelerate, and it was gone. In like a second, it was just gone without making a sound. There were no markings, no window. There was nothing.
Cool.
It was just a sleek, slightly elongated, I'm thinking like a Tic Tac shape, frankly. I mean, he didn't get that specific, but he was very meticulous in what he described. And look, I mean, we were not there. We're never going to know for sure. But all I can say is reading his exact meticulous elderly text as, handwritten. Why? There's no
What's
reason.
The gain? What's the gain in lying?
No benefit there. Yeah.
What's the benefit of making that up that many years later?
He's a Canadian.
Yeah.
We all know about Canadians. Look, they're polite. They dress nicely, a little nicer than Americans.
I don't know. Look at Braden.
Well,
if you saw Braden right now, you'd be like,
Braden's not wearing pants right now, I don't think.
No. It's hot in here, man.
Straight, he's Winnie the Pooh in it hard right now.
The heat wave.
Well, anyway, I
weather
found
advisory.
his report quite credible.
Awesome. Well,
and so I included it in my book.
Well, I'm definitely we're gonna pick up that book because it sounds like there's some great case file material in there for us. And
yeah, there's some unique cases that came to me and me alone, and I included them, and then just a lot of other research that other people have done.
Right on. Hey, we've keeping you longer than you agreed to, so we appreciate it. So we'll let you go, and we'll be in contact about maybe another interview in the near future.
My fun. And by the way, we did want to do a quick plug for Contact in the Desert, which was what this was all about. Remember that part?
Yeah. That's what happens when you have too much fun.
So we're doing Contact in the Desert. I'm doing a couple of presentations. This is all virtual video. I'm doing 2 lectures and a live panel, and that's all on the weekend of June 25th, 26th, 27th, thereabouts.
And 28th.
And I would recommend people check it out. It's actually quite reasonable. This is virtual, but it's good. I've talked to all the folks organizing it. And that's the last weekend of June 25th.
They got,
to the 20.
I mean, our listeners, we've had a whole bunch of speakers on the show doing interviews. It's literally the who's who of the who's going to be there and speaking. So if this at all interests you, if this is a topic, you're definitely going to want to check it out. We're going to be there as well. The 25th.
We'll be there. We'll be there virtually.
Yeah,
we'll be there virtually.
I'll do lectures, but I'll be available for Q&A after the lectures. So it's all live virtual, and I will be there. So, I mean, people will have the opportunity to do some interaction with myself and other speakers as well.
Yeah, it's the cool thing about a virtual conference is you don't have to miss any of the panels. You can go back and watch them all on demand if you missed them live.
Totally.
So.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
I mean, for better or for worse, that's the world we're moving toward. I mean, I like the in-person, shake your hands, look someone in the eye. But the fact is, I've done a number of virtual events, some that I've organized myself and others I participated in, and they can be done very well. That's just the reality. And I think this will be done very well.
Definitely. Make sure we'll put all the links to Richard's work and Contact in the Desert in the show notes. Don't miss it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, good.
Awesome.
Lots of fun.
All right. Take her away, Braden.
All right. As we always say at the end of these things, keep those eyes on the skies.